When I made my last Ugly American Sports video, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I had first planned to make it more in-depth, especially in the end where I explained what all I believe is going to happen in college football and all of college sports. But I was pressed for time and realized the video would be lengthy and possibly drag on. So it ended up with me mainly ranting on most of what has happened in the last 35 years, and I admit it was kinda ramshackle. It didn't help that while I was making it, the news broke that the University of North Carolina was considering a move to the Southeastern Conference, which threw my predictions another loop. Since then, a number of other YouTubers have released videos saying the move is already a done deal, with pretty much no facts or evidence to prove that. I want to make this clear. Everything I am about to say in regards to the future of college football is only speculation on my part. I do hope to talk to people who could provide more insight, and I of course may end up being wrong on everything. All I am saying is what my own gut is telling me as to where we are headed. So hopefully in this video I can explain that part further. Now there are 3 incidents you need to remember that essentially brought us to where we are now. The first was in the late 1970s when the NCAA separated Division I college football and only football into Divisions 1A and 1AA. These would later be renamed the Football Bowl Subdivision and the Football Championship Subdivision in a vain attempt to claim that both are still Division I. We all know that's not the case, so we will be calling them 1A and 1AA for this and future videos. The second was the 1984 Supreme Court ruling on the NCAA versus the University of Oklahoma, which again ended the NCAA's restrictions on how many college games could be televised and allowed schools and conferences to pursue their own TV contracts. Which is what has led to all of the conference realignment and free agency that I talked about in the first video. Last comes the movement that started in the 1990s to try and make the national championship for Division 1A football finally be decided on the field instead of just in the news polls. It started with the Bowl Coalition in 1992 and became the Bowl Alliance in 1995 before it was replaced with the Bowl Championship Series in 1998 and currently the College Football Playoff. This, as it should have been expected, has become the biggest threat to the hegemony that the major schools and conferences have had on 1A college football for years, as it has increased the chances for a small school/conference to possibly get into a national championship picture. Everything that has happened with conference realignment since then, and what I believe is about to happen, has been the effort of those bigger schools to kick those smaller ones back down the pecking order. And they are determined to destroy everything that has made college football what it is in order to do that. Before the Bowl Coalition was formed, all Division 1A football conferences were single division and contained no more than 10 schools that were all regionally connected. As I said, it was simple and made sense. Keep travel costs down, build regional rivalries. By the time the BCS was created, at least one of the more famous conferences had ended, and we had 2 conferences of 12 schools separated into divisions with a conference championship game. But those 2 were still regionally contained for the most part. There had been one conference of 16 schools, but it split into 2 separate conferences after 3 years. 6 conferences had guaranteed berths into any of the 4 and later 5 BCS bowl games, with all other 1A conferences labeled as non-automatic qualifiers. By 2014, the BCS was to be replaced with the College Football Playoff, and the Big East Conference's days were finished as a football conference, thanks to many of its schools getting poached by other conferences and the non-football schools in it getting fed up with it stretching itself out further and further to maintain relevance. This left us with the Power 5 conferences and the remaining Group of 5 in 1A football, with it generally accepted that most, if not all, of the playoff spots would come from the Power 5. In the years since the creation of the playoff, despite the playoff now expanding to 12 teams as of this video's posting, we have seen another conference ravaged by the others and losing its power conference status, while the remaining 4 power conferences now all contain 16 schools each spread out across the entire country. Meanwhile, all of the group conferences have had to pillage one another and or dig for schools daring to be promoted out of 1AA just to stay afloat. And not all are surviving. The Western Athletic Conference's days appear over after the 2025-26 season. A conference that once had the likes of Arizona and Arizona State, and even in the 2000s had some level of relevance, as Boise State was in that conference during their monumental 2006 season where they beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, but now they have gone the same way of the Southwest Conference. And if the biggest schools, people in the media, and even too many casual fans have their way, the same fate will befall not only the remaining group conferences, but half of the remaining power conferences as well. As I said before, none of this makes sense to anyone with common sense. Now that the playoff has a 12-team field with 5 automatic berths to the top 5 ranked conferences, why would any school want to abandon the ACC or the Big 12 to go to the bloated, gluttonous Big 10 or SEC, where their chances of winning and getting a playoff spot become nil? Why would Clemson want to abandon a league they have regularly won to go to the SEC, where they would have to compete with Alabama, LSU, and Tennessee for a playoff spot? Why would TCU want to leave their regional rivalries with Texas Tech and Baylor that they fought for so long to resume to be an also-ran in the Big Ten in the shadow of Michigan and Ohio State? There can only be one logical reason, and that is the fear that another split in Division I is coming. In 1983, there were 113 schools playing Division 1A football. In 2025, there are 136. This would also make one scratch their head and ask, why do this? When 1AA has had an actual NCAA-backed playoff for years, and most football programs at the 1A level lose millions of dollars a year, even the ones that make it to bowl games. The only logical reason here is ego. I've had an analogy for years. People would rather run the worst steak and ale in the world than the best Waffle House. All these schools care about is being able to say that technically they are at the same level as schools like Texas, Alabama, and Ohio State. Even if they never would beat one of these schools in a million years, they want to be able to say they might do it one day. Even as an Alabama will spend 20 times more on football than Alabama State. This is even more true for schools that may have never been the true blue blood of college football, but have still been at the top division for many years. Schools like Texas Tech, TCU, Arizona, California, and even schools known for other sports like North Carolina, Kansas, and Kentucky. With the fear among them that soon Division I will be split up again, with only the SEC and Big Ten conferences being at the highest level, these schools are doing whatever it takes to get into one of those two conferences, even if it means abandoning their old rivals. But ultimately, it's not going to matter, because the one entity that has truly been manipulating everything from the beginning already knows the select few that will be in the new top order of college football, and many of these schools are not on the list. And that entity is ESPN. The worldwide leader in sports has been orchestrating everything, at least since they poached away the rights to broadcast SEC games away from CBS. Since then, it's been a complete push to try and constantly air nothing but games featuring big-name schools against one another every single week. And trust me, they want Alabama to stop playing Vanderbilt and even Auburn as soon as possible. And the only way to do that is to break away the big schools away from all the others and consolidate them into a new college football cartel. The consolidation will ultimately finish in only 20 to 21 schools to form a college football super league with its own national championship that none of the more than 100 programs previously part of 1A will ever get an opportunity to compete for. It will be an exclusive country club operating the same way as the NFL and the other major professional sports leagues. I will tell you right now who these exclusive schools will be. They are Alabama, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana State, Georgia, Florida, Florida State, Miami, Tennessee, Clemson, UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska, and Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the key to why it will be an odd number of 21 schools, as they will insist maintaining their independence as far as being able to lay out their own schedule and keep all money from their own TV contract with NBC and all bowl games they make. Thus, the Super League will have a 12-game regular season. All schools except Notre Dame will be set into 5 divisions of 4 schools each. They will play each of their 3 regional rivals every year. Of the remaining 9 games on the schedule, 1 will be reserved for playing Notre Dame or possibly another school outside the Super League if such schools survive. The remaining 8 games for each school will be planned out by ESPN and not the coaches, so that they play the other 16 schools in the Super League every other year. There will be an 8-team playoff where the champions of each division get automatic berths, with 3 at-large ones so Notre Dame can still get a way in. This is ESPN's master plan. Inundate people with a super schedule where you get Texas versus Ohio State, or Alabama versus USC, or Notre Dame versus Miami every single week. Games that pit major blue bloods against schools that don't fit the national media's view of being a name worth watching will be all but eliminated. All other schools will be barred from ever entering this Super League and competing for their championship or collecting any of their revenue. They will be left to fend for themselves. On the surface, you might think this won't be so bad. The viewing public will get the best against the best for the entirety of the football season, and the remaining schools will still be able to compete for a championship at a level that more benefits them. Those other schools won't have to spend millions of dollars they can't actually afford to try and compete with the big boys. But it won't be as sunshine and roses as you think, because this will lead to maybe hundreds of schools dropping football completely. Because in their minds, if they can't be at the highest level, it won't be worth playing at all. This isn't even discussing what ramifications such a separation will have on all other college sports, to the point where even the vaunted NCAA basketball tournament might not survive. Ultimately, all college sports as we have known them could very likely be destroyed, and the people will be left with nothing but a college football league acting like a professional league with talent vastly inferior to the actual pros. They will be treated as nothing more than customers, not fans. Prices to watch both in person and on television will keep rising to the point where most people will not be able to afford it. Expect less and less effort to put as many students in the stands as possible. At some point, even the bands themselves may be eliminated so they can give more seats to rich old boosters and especially corporations. The passion that made college football what it has been will be gone forever, all because of greed, ego, and stupidity. And eventually, everyone will have to ask if it's worth watching anymore. Congratulations, college football! You are on the verge of killing the golden goose.